add a note to that it's not only men who have guarded the tomb of the unknown soldier. The first female to guard the tomb earned her Tomb Guard identification badge in 1995, and since then there have been 6 others. So it's not just men who guard the tomb of the unknown soldier. But I want to talk about Veterans Day and why it is on the 11th of November. And I'll get to that in just a minute because I'm going to show you and illustrate to you why it is on the day that it is. But I got to be one of the luckiest guys on the face of the earth when I ended up, instead of fighting in the rice paddies of Vietnam, I ended up walking the mat at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. I was drafted into the United States Army in 1968. Everybody know what drafted means? I was told by the government to come and serve. I didn't volunteer. I was drafted. I had been in college, and I dropped a course and lost my student deferment, and I got drafted. So I got to be one of the luckiest guys on the face of the earth, and I got to be one of these guys, and that is I. This photograph was taken on the 15th of June, 1969, upon the 4th month anniversary of my first ever walk on the mat at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. This is the mat. This is where the guard walks. And this is a rubber surface that prevents cold air from coming up, cold from rock coming up into their body. It also gives a little bit of traction. But it also does one other thing, and it prevents our shoes from wearing a groove in the granite because the bottom of our shoes have metal plates on them. So, but walking the mat is one of the things that tomb guards do, on and on and on. And I'm going to tell you how long it's been going on in just a little bit. But it was the first day that I got to wear this. On my right breast pocket. This is called the Tomb Guard Identification Badge. It is one of the least awarded badges in the United States military. And it has the distinction of being the only badge that can be revoked for as long as the owner lives. Okay, so if I do anything, I'm 74 years old. If I do anything that brings discredit upon the United States Army, the tomb, or the unknown soldiers themselves, this badge can be taken away from me. But it's not going anywhere. I'm going to keep it because it is part of who I am. This is the Tomb Guard Identification Badge. And I've passed it around before, but I don't want to pass it around this big of a crew. But I want you to know what it looks like and how big it is. It's about the size of a silver dollar. It's worn in the right breast pocket. But if I do anything that brings discredit upon the Army, the tomb, or the unknowns themselves, this can be revoked, taken away from me for as long as I live. And I certainly don't plan on doing anything that would warrant that, okay? So, I got to be a guard in 1969 and 1970. And we have a motto in our society. The Boy Scouts have a motto. What's the Boy Scout motto? Be prepared. Be prepared. Our motto is this: soldiers never die until they are forgotten. Tomb guards never forget. We also have something called the Sentinel's Creed, which we hold very dear. It goes like this, and I'll come back to it at the end. My dedication to this sacred duty is total and wholehearted. In the responsibility bestowed on me, never will I falter. And with dignity and perseverance, my standard will remain perfection. Through the years of diligence and praise and the discomfort of the elements, I will walk my tour in humble reverence to the best of my ability. It is he who commands the respect I protect, his bravery that made us so proud. Surrounded by well-meaning crowds by day, alone in the thoughtful peace of night, this soldier will, in honored glory, rest under my eternal vigilance. Now, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was born out of the First World War. First World War was fought between 1914 and 1918, and it claimed about 13 million lives. That's a lot, okay? The United States of America lost 116,000 active duty personnel. mostly soldiers, but 430 of those were nurses. Okay, so 63,000 battle deaths and 53,000 other deaths, including a thing called the pandemic of 1918-1919, the Spanish flu, as it was also called. But 116,000 Americans died. And if you average that out from the day we declared war until the armistice, that's 200 per day. Can you imagine tuning in the news and hearing 200 Americans died in France today? Well, that's basically what happened over time during 1917 and 1918. So, in 1915, the war had been going on since late summer of 1914. In 1915, a Canadian doctor named John McCrae, he was a lieutenant colonel. He was also a soldier, but he was a doctor. And after the funeral of a friend of his, he sat down on the tail end of an ambulance wagon, and he wrote the following poem. In Flanders fields the poppies blow. That's a misprint. Between the crosses row on row that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, but now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. And he immediately threw that poem in the trash. And a friend of his rescued it. He said, John, this is good. May I send this to London? And he said, go, do whatever you want. He just buried his best friend. So he said, do whatever you want. That was in May, early May of 1915, following the second battle for the town of Ypres in Belgium. And his friend sent that poem off to Great Britain, and in December of 1915, it was published in the magazine Punch, and it went viral. What, you know what I mean, how could something go viral in 1915? Well, it did. It went around the world. It was translated into most languages, and it became very popular, and it became memorized by school children all over the English-speaking world. In Flanders fields the poppies blow. My mom, of course, knew that poem. She was born in 1913, so she knew that poem well. But, so, in 1919, after the war was over, the American Legion decided they were going to make the poppy their symbol of the sacrifice of World War I, the first war or the Great War. And this is a Canadian poppy. I got this when I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We had some Canadians came across from Windsor, Canada, to give the Rotary Club I was speaking to some of these beautiful poppies. And I actually like these. I actually like these better than the Buddy poppies. The American poppies are not quite as, I don't think they're quite as pretty, but I like them better than the American versions. But, so the poppy became very popular, and in 1923, the Veterans of American Wars, the VFW, began selling them, and the profits that they made from selling the poppies went to support the widows and orphans of the First World War. And so that's where the poppy became very popular. And I came over, I was in the airport yesterday, except for my Rotary Club, which met yesterday morning. One of my friends, whose father fought in the First World War, handed out poppies to everybody. But I love wearing the poppies. And of course, if you're in Canada or Great Britain or Australia, you wear this the whole month of November. You wear your poppy. It's part of your outfit, part of what you wear. So the armistice that ended the slaughter of the First World War was signed in this railroad car. This was the portable railroad portable command center for Field Marshal Ferdinand Foch, the French commander in the First World War. And these are the gentlemen who signed the document that ended that terrible, terrible war. No Americans, French, Germans, and English only at this signing. There were no Americans present at the signing of the armistice that ended the Great War. So that happened early in the morning on November 11th, 1918. About 5 o'clock in the morning, the documents were signed right after 5 o'clock to take effect 6 hours later at 11 o'clock, so that the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918 would mark the end of hostilities, the end of the killing of the First World War. So, in Britain, 2 years after the signing of the armistice, they decided to honor one unknown soldier in a special place called Westminster Abbey. The British lost almost 900,000 soldiers in the First World War. 900,000, that's a big number, isn't it? Okay? So, of those 900,000, 400,000 of them were presumed missing and presumed dead. Okay? So, they chose one to be buried at Westminster Abbey, and this is his grave in Westminster Abbey. It says, this man can give his life itself for God, for king and country, for loved ones, and the empire, for the sacred cause of justice and the freedom of the world. So this is a very special place for the Brits, and they love their poppies in Britain. And in France, the French lost 1.2 million. That's a bigger number. 4% of their population. If the United States of America, with over 300 million, lost 4% of its population today, that would be about 13 million. Can you imagine being in a conflict where 13 million Americans died? That's hard to think about. But that's the kind of loss that the French took. 4% of their population was killed or missing in action in the First World War. So the French buried their unknown soldier beneath the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. And this is where they were. Ici repose un soldat français mort pour la patrie, for the fatherland. And this is the eternal flame. And that eternal flame has burned to this day since November 11th, 1920. So, the Americans were so impressed with how the French and the British embraced this shrine for their unknown soldier that legislation was introduced December 21st, 1920 by Hamilton Fish III of New York. He had fought in the Great War. He had commanded a battalion of all black soldiers from New York called the Harlem's Hellfighters, the 369th Infantry. And he introduced legislation on December 20th, and on March 4th, 1921, Woodrow Wilson signed that legislation into law, his last day in office. So, things were put in motion to select an unknown soldier for the United States of America. So crews were sent to 4 American cemeteries, Annemasse, Meuzargan, Somme, and Saint-Mihiel. And they exhumed. What does exhumed mean? Dug up the remains of 4 American unknown soldiers. They placed them, they transported them in flag-draped coffins to a place called Chalon-sur-Marne, France. And these were placed in 4 identical coffins. And a Sergeant Edward F. Younger was given the task. He was given a spray of white roses, and given the task to lay those roses on one of those 4 caskets. So he walked around the 4 caskets several times. And he picked the second one from the left. Why? And later he was asked why he picked that one. He says, I felt something coming from that casket, as if it were somebody in there that I knew, that I had fought with, that I trained with, somebody I loved. So that's why he picked that casket. And those remains were taken out and put in a special casket and brought out to the caissons, to the train, and then from the train to the ship. And from the ship, taken from the ship in Le Havre, France, all the way to the naval shipyard on the Anacostia River in Washington, D.C. And from there to the U.S. Capitol, aboard the USS Olympia, to the U.S. Capitol building, where the unknown soldier lay in state beneath the Capitol Rotunda on the Lincoln catafalque. This pedestal is the same pedestal that Abraham Lincoln lay in state in 1865, after his assassination at Ford's Theater on the 14th of April of 1865. So this is our unknown soldier, President Harding, and former President William Howard Taft, paying their respects to the unknown soldier. Then, by the caisson, if you ever heard of the name of a caisson is what was used to take ammunition to the front and bring dead and wounded back from the front. So the old Army song, the caissons go rolling along, was about these vehicles that were used to transport ammunition and dead and wounded back. So here's one, that is John J. Pershing, right there. General Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force, will walk with this casket all the way down to Georgetown, across the ridge, and into Arlington National Cemetery. And there's President Harding making his remarks, maybe the same remarks that Kelly was talking about were made here that day. And here is the final lowering of the casket into the ground. And then the bottom of this crypt, there was brought from the battlefields of France some soil. So a layer of soil, 2 inches thick, from the battlegrounds of France was placed in the bottom of this crypt, in the bottom of this hole, so that American soldier, that unknown American soldier, would forever lie on the French soil that he died defending in 1917 or 1918. So there were efforts made to protect the tomb, but this is what the tomb looked like. From 1921 until 1925, one day in November 1925, November 17th to be exact, an American veteran of the First World War came around the corner and found a family with a blanket spread out on top of it, having a picnic lunch. He immediately chased them away, and he went to the White House. He walked up to the White House and went through the gate, walked up to the White House and rang the doorbell, and somebody answered. Can you imagine that happening? Okay? And he got in to see then President Calvin Coolidge and explained the situation. That people were disrespecting the tomb of the unknown soldier and something needed to be done about it. And Coolidge agreed. And the next day, he placed a civilian guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. A few months later, March 25th, 1926, the United States Army took over. And the United States Army has always guarded the tomb of the unknown soldier. No other service, the U.S. Army. I tell people I was a tomb guard, they say, oh, you must have been in the Marine Corps. I said, well, I have the most admiration, utmost admiration and respect for the U.S. Marine Corps, bravest and brave. But the United States Army has always had the task of guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier. 2 reasons. First reason is the Army is the senior service by a few months, okay? The Army, you know why we have Flag Day on June 14th? Because that's the birthday of the Army. The Continental Army was proclaimed by the Continental Congress June 14th, 1775. U.S. Marine Corps was established November 10th. This is the anniversary. Happy birthday, Marines. Any Marines in here? Okay. Anybody going to be a Marine? Okay.
My uncle's Marine.
Okay. Well, tell them happy birthday to the Marine Corps from an old Army sergeant. But Army is the senior service. And the other reason that the Army guards the tomb of the unknown soldier is that Arlington National Cemetery is administered by the Department of the Army. Another logical reason why the Army always guarded the tomb. In 1931, this tomb replaced this tomb. This was one of the designs that was suggested. It's kind of weird, but this is what won. This is the design that won out. And this design here has 3 figures: peace with the dove, valor with the sword, and victory in the center, embracing them both. And on each side there are 3 wreaths, and these wreaths are open at the bottom. These are wreaths of mourning or sadness. A wreath of victory is open at the top, okay? Like a wreath that an Olympian wears on their head. The points are up, okay? But this is a wreath of mourning or sadness. And the tomb was guarded only in the daylight hours. But in 1937, it was discovered that people were coming into the cemetery at night with hammers and chisels and knocking pieces off the wreaths and figures to take home as souvenirs. midnight, July 2nd, 1937. A 24-hour guard was posted at the tomb. The tomb has been guarded non-stop ever since. 24/7, 365, since midnight, July 2nd, 1937. And I had the privilege of 15 and a half months of that continuum of 85 plus years of making sure that this place was neither vandalized nor disrespected. And that's what the tomb guards are there for, to prevent people from vandalizing or misconstruing the tomb's meaning by being irreverent, by being disruptive. So we have orders to shut people up if they get loud and obnoxious at the tomb. And if you look on YouTube, you'll see that. You'll see a bunch of those where people the sentinel is warning people to be quiet. Silence and respect is what is expected at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And I will tell you, if you ever go to Arlington, I urge you, if you go to the tomb, to be silent, to be quiet. Because it's not about you. It's about those tens of thousands. Arlington is the final resting place of over 400,000 American servicemen and women and their next of kin. Arlington is not about you. It's about those who have given their last full measure of devotion, as Lincoln said so appropriately in the Gettysburg Address. So, then World War II came about. And there were plans to make a tomb for the unknown soldier of World War II, very close to the World War I unknown. And then that was supposed to happen in 1950. Well, something happened in the summer of 1950, June 25th, 1950. North Korean troops came across the 38th parallel. The Korean War began, and that put the plans on hold. So in 1958, it was decided that we would bury both the Korean War and the World War II unknown soldier the same day. And the selection of the Atlantic candidate took place. The transatlantic selection, May 12th. 13 unknown soldiers from 13 different American cemeteries were brought to the Epinal Memorial near the Vosges Mountains in France. And Major General Edwin O'Neill was given this wreath, and he placed it on the 5th casket from the left. And this became our transatlantic unknown soldier. And he was transported across the ocean. And in Hawaii, at about the same time, 6 candidates were brought. 4 from the Philippines, from the American Cemetery in Manila, and 2 from the Hawaiian Punch Bowl, or the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, were brought to this place where the Trans-Pacific selection took place on May the 16th, 1958. And all of them were brought together aboard the USS Canberra in late May of 1958. This is the Korean War unknown, already selected in Hawaii. One of these is the transatlantic, one is the trans-Pacific candidate, and this gentleman, Corporal William Charette, he at the time was the only enlisted man in the Navy with a Medal of Honor, was given a wreath to select, and selected this one. The remains in this casket will be wrapped in sailcloth, weighted, and buried at sea, as per naval tradition. So these two come to the Capitol, where they will lie in state for 48 hours. This is the death watch, okay? And this gentleman was society president before me, Jim Carter. So they watch, the death watch watches all through the clock, all around the clock. So this is a photograph from above in the Capitol Rotunda. And this is a very special place. It hurt me deeply to see people trashing this place. January 6th of 2021. But this is a special sacred place where these unknowns lie in state in 1958, where the unknown soldier in World War I lie in state in 1921. All of these soldiers, sailors, and Marines are recipients of the Medal of Honor, and that's why they're given the duty of taking the caskets out down Pennsylvania Avenue and across the Memorial Bridge from the Lincoln Memorial all the way into Arlington National Cemetery to the National Memorial Amphitheater. And who's that? Dwight David Eisenhower. I had the privilege of speaking at his library museum on the 50th anniversary of his death. President Eisenhower, 34th President of the United States, giving medals of honor to the unknown soldiers. And then they brought them out. And prior to the flag folding, and this Korean War unknown is the representative of nearly 7,000 Americans who went missing in Korea. And this unknown soldier is the single representative of the 87,850 Americans who went missing in the Second World War. That's a big number. Okay? So, on 28th of May, 1984, President Reagan presiding over the interment of remains that were said to be unknown from the Vietnam War. They never really were. May 11th, 1972, First Lieutenant Michael Joseph Blassie was flying an A-37 Dragonfly in close support to ground troops over An Vietnam, when his wingman said he saw ground fire come up through Blassie's plane. Blassie's plane rolled over, went in with a fireball, and they sent ground crews in to try to rescue him if he were alive. There was no way that he survived it. 6 months later, they got on site. They were looking for the remains of Michael Joseph Blassie. And what they found were 4 ribs, a humerus bone, and part of a pelvis. There was no skull, no helmet. I don't have to paint a picture of what happens to a human body that lies on the jungle floor in Southeast Asia for 6 months. But there wasn't much left of him except for those few bones. And so, there was also a wallet with a picture ID in it and money. And somewhere in the chain of custody of those artifacts, the wallet disappeared. And with it, the best proof of who that was. And so, Michael Joseph Blassie, those remains were put in storage and labeled believed to be Michael Joseph Blassie. 7 years later, another pathologist came in and called him into question and called him X26 unknown because the length of the humerus was, he believed, too long to be Blassie's. But this is X26 being buried, and the family found out the paper trail from believed to be Michael Joseph Blassie led here. And they got orders to exhume, to dig those remains up and test them. New mitochondrial DNA testing techniques in 1998 proved that it was indeed Michael Joseph Blassie. First female sentinel, 1995, Heather Lynn Johnson. There's Michael's grave, and there's Michael. I was young once. When I went to Fort Ord, California, I volunteered for the Old Guard. And I was lucky because most of the buddies that I went to training with went to Vietnam. I went here. I went to Fort Myer, Virginia, and there were 900 guys in the battalion, but only 12 doing this job, and I volunteered 3 more times to get to this point, to where I could be a guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. I volunteered. I went down to the tomb on my own time, after duty hours, and learned what I had to learn to do the walk, to become a tomb guard. So I became a tomb guard in February of 1969, and I'm wearing no insignia of rank and no name tag. That's so that the sentinel never outranks the guy in here, or the guys in here, and that the sentinel is as anonymous or as nameless as the unknown soldiers themselves. No name tag, no insignia of rank, and that is for a reason. So on Halloween of 1969, I became commander of the relief, 3 stripes, 45 automatic on my hip, and I became the guy who changed the guard. The guy who comes out in the middle and says,
"Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I am Sergeant Tudor of the United States Army, commander of the relief Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It is requested that visitors remain silent and standing during the changing of the guard. All military personnel in uniform should render the hand salute upon the commands of present arms."